Okay, we might go. It's 11:01. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. I'm just 1 sec. I'm going to go back and share my slides now, and then we can get going properly. Here we go. We all can see that. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. This is the second webinar for the year. Obviously, like most businesses, we ran lots of them during COVID. We're back on the webinar circuit this year, and it's been great. Our webinars, we do like them to be very interactive. So thank you for everyone that's got their cameras on, and get ready for questions, because we'll ask questions of you. It's not just about us talking at you today. We hope to have some real interaction. Today's topic is around breaking past the 15 to 25 franchise locations. So we are doing it. It is more of an operations question, operations session rather than a recruitment session. But obviously, we've got recruiting people on the call as well. So my name is Bruce McFarlane. I'm the CEO of BDC Partners. For those who haven't met before, John Cooksey is the CEO of BDC Performance, and John Sully is the director of BDC Partners, but he's also the CEO of BDC Investments. And we've got a few different franchisor entities that we're part of now. So BDC, for those of you, if this is the first time you've been part of one of our webinars or one of our events, we're part of a broader group. So we have a number of businesses we operate ourselves. So as part of the BDC group, we have a law firm, we have a retail property group, talent acquisition, we mentor people. BDC Partners is our overarching business, and BDC Recruitment, and the BDC Investment business, which I've just mentioned. And then we're part of what we call BDC Collective. So associated projects with shop fits and fixtures. We've got Hatch, which is an online directory for franchise sales. Gap Maps does location intelligence. Fordham's for accounting. Benjamin and Benjamin for insurance, and Little Giant Finance for finance. So a number of businesses that we work really closely with as part of our BDC community, which helps us to get some great insights across the whole of the franchise and retail sector. For today, there's a couple of ways if you'd like to participate in the discussion. There is the chat function, which you may be familiar with. So I'll just send a question in that, and we can read it out, or obviously you can raise your hand and wave at me, and we can discuss any of the topics you'd like to discuss. But what I'm going to do now is hand it over to John Cooksey, who's going to talk about what we're talking about today. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Bruce said, today's not about, it's not a presentation. It's actually, we actually asked, some of you were nice enough to complete that. We sent out a bit of a survey to get some insights from the group ahead of today so that we could shape up what we were going to talk about, and give John Sully some fodder in order to get him motivated to contribute, which I think we'll find out doesn't actually take a lot of effort. But so we thought we'd create a little bit of structure. So in the survey, we basically asked what we thought were the challenges to growing beyond 25 systems, 25 franchisees in a network. And this partly came out of discussions with franchisors last week when we did our performance labs around the country and so on. So again, as Bruce said, we're not pretending to know all the answers, but we'll provide a bit of an overview of what the responses were around those 5 key areas, which is barriers to reaching 25 franchisees. What are the drivers of growth? Once you had got to roughly 25, 15 to 25, 35, similar sort of concept. What are the biggest barriers to growth? How well do your franchisees understand what their KPIs are and other business indicators? Do they have P&Ls? Do you meet them to discuss their P&Ls and so on? So that's a really pertinent conversation we've discovered with franchisors and franchisees over the past 12 months or so. And then finally, we'll touch on the importance of franchisee relationships, which it's a little bit like dating going into franchising. It's really exciting to start. And then what's the level of involvement and commitment beyond that, and franchisees are motivated and so on. And then if we haven't covered questions that you've got, we'll open it up to a broader Q&A session at the end. But as Bruce said, please ask any questions that you'd like simply by raising your hand, or just ask the question or throw it into the chat. So we'll move on to the first.
For 1 second. So there's people just texting me about being admitted into the thing. So Lisa and Tanya, if you can see if there's any other people in the waiting room, There's people just trying to get in still.
Yeah, I don't have anyone.
Okay. Will Smith's just saying. But anyway,
Yeah, he's not on.
no worries. We'll keep going.
Yeah.
It's Will Smith, so I'll just text you back. Thanks, John. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right, Bruce. No trouble. Well, hopefully when Will Smith turns up, he's happier with me than he was with Chris Rock. So if we move on to...
That's terrible, but that is...
I thought on the spot that was quite good, actually. So I'll be looking for a hand coming out through the screen. So if we move on to barriers to reaching 25 franchisees, Bruce.
Yep.
Yeah, so we asked for people attending, what were the biggest barriers for them in terms of reaching 25 franchisees. We've all worked in systems that have grown from, and certainly John and the team at BDC Investments are putting their money where their mouth is at the moment. So trying to grow a couple of businesses beyond 25 franchises as well. So we're experiencing it themselves. So just in summary, some of the things that came up were understandably the recruitment sales process is challenging in getting scale, trying to attract a master agent or master franchisee into a system early on is often challenging because the business almost doesn't really exist. And finding optimal locations naturally post-COVID, the sectors continue to grow, and finding the right places to open to set up a franchise is a challenge. Some of the other initial challenges around brand recognition, understanding the system, having sufficient resources, both people and physical and financial, as well as the regulations. So the regulations have all just changed recently, so that's obviously a challenge. And then a big challenge for franchising in particular, similar to other small business and other business growth challenges, is the modest income that is generated from royalties, which is a clear challenge. And then varying store performance, if you like, plus a low return on investment for advertising. So not just a startup business problem, but a startup business challenge where you don't keep all the revenue that comes through the door. So that was the summary in terms of barriers to reaching 25 franchisees. And at the bottom, as we go, you can read these for yourself, but they're just a couple of insights from us that we generated through the performance labs last year in terms of the things that are, tend to be useful when it comes to startup networks, if you like. So any observations or questions? Did we not, if any of you that filled in the survey and we didn't capture something you thought was particularly insightful or important around the initial barriers to getting to 20 franchisees, 25 franchisees?
And we've got a couple of franchisors in the crowd that are in around that. So I'm going to pick on people as well on the way through, but Ben, Fletcher, your system's around that size. Who else is in here? Will, yours is around that as well. Any other things, what have been barriers for you guys?
I think that covers it, to be honest.
Yep. Anyone else? Any other questions on the data? Andrew, yeah.
Hey guys, good morning. I'm just wondering a little bit on the comment here around recruitment sales process. When we say recruitment sales process, I'm assuming we're talking about sort of more holistically sales and marketing there. Was there anything that came through on the marketing side specifically?
I think that was more around finding franchisees as opposed to sales and marketing. There wasn't a lot of direct feedback in terms of marketing challenges.
Okay. Sorry. And when I say marketing, I sort of mean marketing. Maybe it wasn't clear. Marketing in the interest of finding franchisees and selling to those franchisees.
Yeah. So lead generation stuff, which Dave and Lisa do with a number of clients. Yeah. So looking for franchisees. So I think the point was, it was one question. So there wasn't a drill down into particular things. It was sort of sales and marketing were grouped in together for the responses.
Cool. Makes sense. Thanks.
Ben,
based on the topic of 15 to 25, do you think it's quite common practice for brands of this size to be trying to do master franchise agreements, which obviously accelerates growth, but we're at 19 opens and we've got more in the pipeline, but it still feels a bit sort of like it doesn't feel big enough to be attracting franchises. Do you think it's pretty, I guess my question is, do you think it's pretty common to people of our size to look for masters or get further down the track?
I think it's, I'll start, John, sorry, but
No, go for it, Bruce.
my experience is it's not that common to do masters anymore. And I think masters were pretty common in early days where it was more around geography, about providing support, which I know today is a lot about providing support. And so it's interesting, but I think in Australia, people are like, well, it's not that hard to get to Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, which is where probably 70% of your franchises are going to come from. The Perth challenge is always one where, if you're based over, if you've got franchisees over there, getting to support them. But I think you just, and others may have different experiences, but my experience, things like area development or master, like, different ways to grow your network haven't been as common in Australia as they probably are in the US. I know, Ben, obviously we're in the US and it's still reasonably common to have different arrangements like that there. Anyone else's, any other comments? John, do you want to keep going then?
Yeah, let's move on. We can circle back to that if we need to, for sure.
Not right sure why I cannot move this, but anyway.
Go on, add text.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, great. Having established some of the challenges for getting to 15 to 25 to 35 franchisees, we then thought we would ask, what are some of the drivers of growth once you've got that? Maybe leveraging a little bit of scale. So just in terms of, in summary, and to Bruce's point before, the average number of franchisees of the people that responded was roughly 21 or 22. But some of the drivers of growth beyond the 25 was around ongoing marketing and training programs and revising that. So it's an interesting one. It's about not reinventing, but massaging the processes and systems and procedures and so on, moving into that second phase of growth, if you like, transitioning from the emerging brand and leveraging the network size. I think John Sully's made the observation, we've all had a look at the data too, like I think the average number of franchisees per network in Australia is around 50 or something. And so as an industry, leveraging resources to be able to grow is particularly important. And then a move to a focus on multi-unit growth and franchisee performance, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. If we all were to step outside the sector for a second and think about whether we would take on a franchise or not, and if we were to start a network from scratch, the move to multi-unit growth here in particular, Bruce has seen it a lot in America, is a recent trend, and it makes sense, particularly from a lending perspective and an operational perspective, in that you're better off growing with people who understand your business. So you don't have to, there's so much effort that goes into attracting them and then onboarding them and then training them up and making sure if they've got staff, making sure their staff know how to operate their business as well. So I think an increased focus on multi-unit growth is going to continue, I think, across the sector as well.
And it's interesting, but linked into franchisee performance as well. So ensuring that I think people have come out and stuck where they've granted multiple territories to people before they've seen them operate one. And that's not uncommon. And then they're trying to take territories off them. But if franchisors that grant a territory or a location and then see how they perform and then have a process around that before they open their next one, that they've met some certain KPIs, I think that's a pretty important part.
Yeah, I think so too. John, in your Michelle's days, you were particularly keen on growing the system purely based on one store at a time in terms of their operational growth. So you want to share a little bit of your experience around just how important it is to have every single franchisee be successful in their own business?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I'm sort of sitting here thinking about what are you know what is there a magic bullet with this shit about how to grow and blow past that 25 stores, and that is the key, because to me, Ben, I'll use you as an example, mate. You get to 25 stores, you've been doing everything for however many years, and you need to go out and find another one of you. And generally, because it's your baby, you'll find it very, very difficult, and most people will try and replicate themselves. I think that's where a lot of people stop for that reason, because they can't replicate themselves, and they shouldn't. Two, that you will all have a lot of baggage in your business. You'll have franchisees that are sucking the life out of you, that you've made mistakes with. You probably will have a company business company store, company franchise that you're spending a lot of time on, that you had to take back from someone else. There's going to be a lot of distractions. And to be blunt, at that level, you guys are struggling to pay your own bloody bills rather than someone else's, because you've got minimal royalties coming in. So, to answer John's question, that when we first started at Michelle's, there were 16 stores down here, and we kicked out 4 straight away. We just had to draw the line in the sand, and it's not a very nice saying, but have a cross on a hill, that this is what you need to do. Everyone needs to sort of toe the line. You've been able to be pretty wet and loose. I mean, a couple of our stores were selling alcohol when we first moved down to Victoria, which I fully endorse, by the way, but not at a Michelle's patisserie.
Speaking of loose, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the businesses that we've invested in now, that I see the same traits that are around that 17, 18 stores. The franchisor is tired. Their process is for franchise recruitment is appalling, to be blunt. I haven't looked at any of your websites, but when we've done other webinars, we have done that. And I think I mentioned in one of them before that in the Melbourne one, I applied for about 12 franchises from smaller franchise systems, and I didn't get one response, not one. So there is a reason why 63% of our franchise systems are 20, 25 stores or franchises or less. So I'm not really answering John's question, but at the start we got rid of the 4 and we just went right back to basics for the remaining 12, and we had to get them looking at their numbers, which they never did and never had. We had to get them understanding those numbers, which they never had. And I think even now those numbers are even more important, because I bet you some of your systems, some of your franchise systems have been set up the wrong way as well. And things have moved, particularly since COVID. And some of you may only have a 1 or 2% marketing levy, when really that should be 3 to 4, depending on the nature of your business. So there's a whole myriad of stuff which I think if we can work through today. I'll shut up now, but we can move on back onto the agenda. But if we start putting a list together of 10 things, that if you went away today and said, fuck, have a look at my process. Sorry about the F word. I'm not really, but anyhow, I'll just say that. Have a look at what your processes are from an outside experience coming in. I think you would start to answer some of your own questions. So John, I'll throw it back to you, and we can keep working through that process. Unless anyone's got any questions, keep going through the agenda.
Thanks, John.
That even go close to answering the question?
That answered lots of questions.
Some of the slides are coming up as well, but that's okay.
Some of them about business.
You want to move to the next slide, John?
Yes, thanks. The third thing that we asked folks was around their biggest barriers to growth. And I guess, part of the summary talks to what John has talked to too, which is most often, and we found this through the performance labs last year with networks and systems of all shapes and sizes. And we know this talking to franchisees who are leaving bigger systems and moving to smaller systems. The biggest challenge or barrier really is internal. It's not really the market. It's allocating resources, and this is a summary of what we've been told, but this is what we observe. It's allocating the right resources and then marketing in the right ways and ensuring a good return on investment for marketing. Whether it's between 15 and 25 or whether it's 55 or 550, or for the lucky networks around the world who might even have 5,000 franchisees. Franchisee engagement and the consistency of performance in a franchisee is by and far the biggest barrier to growth. It doesn't take much for us all to appreciate that if you have 35 franchisees and 4 of them are doing poorly, not only, what they say, it's almost inevitable that everybody, we all get taxed, we all die. The other thing that's inevitable is all the franchisees know which ones are doing well and which ones aren't, even if you want to try and stop them talking to each other, which never happens. And then the third challenge naturally to growth again is around franchisee, lead generation and the rate of inquiries and then the quality of inquiries and then how to follow up with inquiries. And I know Bruce is going to talk about it later, but the next webinar is actually around that. And, when we ran the performance labs last year, we decided there's really only 2 topics that matter. One is finding franchisees and the other is making them successful, because you make money from royalties and, observing the market. It's easy to be attracted to creating products and services and finding franchisees and not necessarily have the disciplines in place to make sure that every single unit is performing and contributing profit. Some of the things we observed in the performance labs that align with this are things like poor financial literacy for franchisees, inconsistency reporting of data across the network, so that we know a lot of you, and this will come up in the later question, we know a lot of you are not only the founder, the national operations manager, but you're also the territory manager and you're also the receptionist as well. And so, having the luxury of time when you meet franchisees is a challenging one. I was lucky enough to work in a really, really big system and we had lots of staff and plenty of time to talk to our franchisees, but it really is that allocation of resources and I think leveraging data, which is particularly important these days. And then, without overstating the obvious, the motivation of franchisees, not just to do what you need them to, but to occasionally go above and beyond and help each other and so on. So it's a couple of observations we made through the performance labs.
And John, with those things, John, a lot of franchisee engagement and motivation. There's a big question about how do you actually find that out? Because you mentioned that sometimes as emerging systems don't have the resources to do that. Andrew, you're on. Andrew Foster. He's running a race in the background there.
Kick it to me.
Hey, sorry guys, was I not muted?
No, mate, that's you're with the Little Ass Carnival or something. Mate.
Oh, it's my son's cross country, so he needed to get a rig along. So he was letting the team down. Sorry about that, Chad. My apologies.
That's cool.
No worries. But I was going to ask you a question, but I'll ask someone else now. So listening to your franchisees, I think, is a key theme to that, and how people do that. And so, we've got some people from bigger systems on. I think, Jason, you're at Baker's Delight, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Yeah. So, is that something like at a larger scale? Is that something that you do regularly? And then, like to hear from someone from a smaller system in terms of surveying your franchisees and whether or not, how do you get information about their engagement and whether or not they're motivated?
Probably a couple of things. Yearly survey to every franchisee. That's really probably benchmarking how we've improved as a business, where we're at. Probably it's honest, it's pretty blunt sometimes, and but part of a broader transparency approach for us. We have a franchise, what we'd call a council, that meet bi-monthly in our Melbourne office, that are representative of franchisees from all around the country, that actually go to Melbourne, talk with the executive directly, sense check ideas and new concepts. They go through that, and then being I'm in New South Wales operations, all of our operations team nationally sit down with every franchisee every 12 months as part of an annual business review. We benchmark their performance on the previous year. We set some short-term, long-term goals with every franchisee, and that's very much a two-way conversation around an honest interaction about where they're at and where they want to be, but it also helps us with their long-term planning to expand, grow, personally improve, or exit, and that's okay too.
Yeah, which is like, obviously that you guys have got a lot of franchisees, 700 or so, then having those systems in place, they're fantastic systems. But I guess looking back at a system that's got the 15 to 25 in making sure some of those things, it's just as easy. You can survey them regularly, you can catch up with them and do the planning stage and stuff. Probably the FACs is an interesting one. Like, at what point do you implement a franchise advisory council? I know, Don Cooksey, you're doing, working with a brand at the moment that's probably just past the 25, but, setting up an FAC for the first time, is that, to really get that understanding of sort of franchisee engagement?
Yes, I think it's an interesting one. Ironically, I think systems implement FACs too late as opposed to too soon. Because often they put the FAC in. The success of an FAC is mirrored to the emotional maturity of the franchise network and the founder leaders and so on. So often people put franchise advisory councils in place to, thinking it's going to fix problems, but they could fix all those problems without an FAC. And the challenges are inconsistency of engagement, lack of resources, launching too many products too quickly. You don't ask us, like all the things that a clever field manager would do anyway. So I think the FAC, the key with the FAC and where Jason works, I think I imagine their FAC works extraordinarily well because the whole business from the beginning was set up with very high levels of engagement with franchisees, almost over budgeting for that on the basis that was a really clever thing to do. And I've worked with KFC and Pizza Hut, and then prior to BDC, ran franchise satisfaction surveys globally with Greg Nathan, and the systems where the franchise satisfaction was the highest were the ones where they had actively budgeted to spend time with franchisees. So I think Brad from Vision is on the call as well. He's just joined Vision, courtesy of us, which is kind of nice. But he might not know everything about Vision, but Vision, they actively budget to spend a lot of time with their franchisees. They probably have more meetings with their franchisees than most other systems. They have ongoing development. They would be genuinely surprised to learn something new about how their franchisees feel. And then they do surveys as well. So it really is, the need for continual transparent engagement. Because there is a lull, once a franchisee joins, after the excitement of building the site and getting the business started and so on, then they actually have to do the work, and some of the enjoyment goes out of it. So it's particularly important at that time to re-engage with them too.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from others if that are contemplating setting up FACs or haven't done it, or have just done it, or even people that are doing their first surveys. Whether it be, we work with Franchise Business Review out of the US, which is when you do surveys globally, benchmarks systems. But then you can just do a Survey Monkey and ask questions. there's lots of different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else has gone through that process recently? No.
Hey, if there's no one, can I just add something just on the Baker's Delight business, which is clearly struggling with 800 franchises. But they are, in my mind, they are the gold standard for how to run a franchise business. The thing I like the most about the business is every franchisee knows every other franchisee's numbers. And they wear it on a lanyard at conferences like a badge of honor. And I think the secret squirrel stuff should be a thing of the past, because if there's anything that motivates franchisees more than having someone from head office that just annoys the shit out of them every month when they come, is listening to their peers and seeing what their peers are achieving. That is one of the biggest motivators. I know when we were sending newsletters out to our franchisees, we used to have a ranking system of where they were for growth and sales, etc. We did top 10, and that's all they looked at. They always complained about communication, but they never read the newsletter. That was the most thing that they were interested in, was seeing how they're going compared to their peers. And if you can come up with a system and start, and at most of your sizes, you should be reasonably fluid to be able to implement that fairly quickly, because it's a real check and a balance. And I would suggest you try and do that fairly quickly if you can.
Hey,
John,
Here you go.
Sorry, Bruce. John, it's Paul from IWS here. We do rostering, financial management, and financial reporting. And I have to say, what you've just mentioned, we have the biggest tick box for all of our product suite at the moment. Most companies want to have that benchmarking facility, and they even want to anonymize it and send it out. But the stats are real, or they will send it out with the stores involved, and it's got a lot of capabilities around it, so you can customize how you want to send it out, whether it be COGS, sales, performance. But there are so many companies that have an appetite for this sort of service at the moment. So I concur with you. Do you know how Baker's Delight actually put that to collate that? Because the issue is that usually how they're receiving the P&Ls. So have they got a chart of accounts which makes it easier for them to do that financial reporting? Do you know?
Oh, look, I'll just give insight. We have a monthly financial statement that our franchisees submit, and then we receive yearly account prepared financials from our franchisees. That's the goal, and let's be honest, that doesn't happen for everyone, but we spend a lot of our time in operations working through the monthly financial statements with franchisees. So that gets submitted on the 10th of every month. It's rolling 12-month data, so it's always comparing, always improving. Traffic light system, green improving, red not improving, just really straightforward and simple. So centralize that data can just be generated into a CSV file or whatever it be, because every franchisee is sharing that with us. But back to the point, every franchisee can see every other franchisee's data.
It's great. I picture it as a force for good, where the franchisor and franchisee can work together, for improvement as well. So there's a number of ways that it can be very powerful to franchisor and franchisee, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, to be honest, if you're not collecting their financial information, including their own personal debt situation, you're just not in the game. You're really not taking it. You're not being a franchisor, and that's, I think, the other thing that's sort of slipped in a little bit of late, and probably after the RFG are on the right track now, in my opinion, but that they certainly weren't before. A lot of franchisors have tried to distance themselves from their franchisees' businesses and stick their head in the sand. And that's not a franchise system, even to the extent, and people will disagree with me, where they get someone else to take the lease. They get the franchisee to take the lease. If you're not prepared to stick it on the line, then you're just not in it. You're doing it half-assed, in my opinion. And around for that financial management side of things, it all comes back to franchisee recruitment. If you, particularly now, where you've got to be with the new laws, then the part of the act, that if you are not giving an adequate ROI yet to be determined, how the fuck do you know what what you're selling out there. So it's there are obviously different. There are good franchisees, there are bad franchisees. But if you own that and put out, here's our top 10, here's our middle 50, here's our bottom 20, whatever it is, then that's what you do. But you've got to know those numbers. It's just critical, in my opinion.
I think. Sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a good. Some of the data that we've just got there on the. I've just brought that slide up about the responses as well. But sorry, you go.
No, you did right. John mentioned ROI, which I thought was a great segue. But before we get into what we all typically think we should be measuring, because that's, you could look this up in a book. I'm sure there's something on YouTube that would talk about for a business. You need to look at these sorts of things. Before we got off the engaging franchisees bit, there's two things that have always struck me around businesses' inability to determine what their best return on investment is. And one is that engaging franchisees. So to Bruce's point with FBR, the cost to engage a franchisee in a survey is like $350 a head, but the return on investment's like 100 times more, simply because you're asking them to help you run your business better. They've gone into business with you, right? If we used IVF to create a child, and in essence, you go to a doctor and they say, give me some money, I'll give you a baby. You go, okay, no worries. And then, franchisees give you money so you can make them rich. It's almost that simple, right? And so they really want to be in business with you. That's the whole point. The other thing, just in terms of ROI, before we move on to the harder sort of indicators, which everybody measures, is in the executive group that I helped Tanya run, we talked about how often systems will stop. You can't stop the business completely, but we'll take the franchisees out of the business to make sure they're trained properly. So, a new product launch, for example, if you've got a business that has not just owner operators, but they've got teams, the return on investment for engaging the franchisee and their team around a new product launch by training them for an hour, even paying the franchisee to put on new staff and so on. So the number of softer business indicators that will enhance your ability to generate more revenue, more profit, and more satisfied franchisees is there's a number of those, and we'll talk about that at the end. But to Bruce's point, back in terms of the general specific business indicators, it's understandable that at the beginning of setting up a network, a franchisor might not necessarily understand exactly what they want to know from a business indicator perspective, because the business is dynamic and it's evolving and so on. But to John's point, what is particularly important is that everything is as tangible and black and white for the franchisees as possible, and as consistent as possible. In the KFC business, we used to have a pace setter thing, which again, you could see by concept all around the country and by revenue. If we all had the same size business, we knew exactly what each other's labor was. We knew what the rent was. We knew what the cost of goods was. And so on, and we knew what the staff turnover was, and so on. So, so it's a particularly, we've listed a couple of things there: revenue, profit, wages, and then operational things like standards, compliance, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, franchisee engagement, and so on. So a number of business indicators. Put your hand up or shout out or throw it into the chat. What are the, and we talked about this in the performance labs last year, if your franchisees only thought of two things that they need to get completely right that makes the biggest difference for your business, what are those things? It might even be the secret sauce. Like, what would be one thing about your business that's unique to your business that they really need to get right?
As a franchisee for Recovery Lab, mine's around contacting the people, following up on the leads.
Right.
And I like in fitness, I suppose, been the same. Like you need to generate, there's a lot of leads coming through. So making sure that it's one of the key KPIs is around time to follow up the leads.
Yeah. Agree. And get results in our business, it's about results. If our members are getting results, they never leave. So
Right.
sales and results.
But that's the big thing, that there are, and we've probably all talked about this, that there are franchise systems that have a high touch and some have a low touch. To me, the low touch thing should be a thing of the past, because they're a couple of examples that exactly like Recovery Lab and listen to your body, that people that are involved generally in gyms, physical fitness, whatever, are very passionate about it. And people that are passionate about what they do are generally shit at what they do on the other side, which is running a business. So there's got to be supporting processes, training, systems, whatever, on that side to complement that passion, because you can't buy passion. Passion is just absolutely gold. So you got to support that. We've invested in a pizza business just recently. A lot of franchisees are Indians. They're bloody hardworking, good people, but they are not all complaining, but a lot of them are saying they're struggling with English. That the people are ringing for pizzas and they're struggling to understand them a bit on the phone. So we're looking at AI bots that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's sort of $5 to $10 grand. You set it up. That bot can take the call, have a full conversation with whoever's coming, whoever's taking the order. It's a lot cheaper. You can put any accent on it. You can any gender, whatever you like, and that solves an issue at that point. From a customer service side of things. Also, it helps that generally if you're ordering online, or if you're going into a shop and you're doing a digital order, the basket size is usually 20 to 25% higher as well. So when you're talking to a bot, you will get that, do you want fries, with that question. So it ticks more boxes, but it's understanding within your franchise system, if you use that analogy and look at your business and break it down, where is the support that they need to make sure that they are maximizing the sales, and understanding the animal that you effectively have as a franchisee and that you're targeting. And have you got all the complementary processes and systems around it to drive the business?
Yes, there's a couple of people that have put comments in the chats around what are the things that they'll measure. So Jason talked about standards and personalizing service. So that's a Baker's Delight thing again. So if they're the two key things, what is that? Compliance with standards? Is that what you mean with that one? And so,
yeah, there's certainly no surprise for us. We've got a process we call 5-star, which is our compliance check that we do twice yearly. No surprise for us that the highest performing sales and profit franchisees are also the highest performing in compliance.
Yeah,
and it's just a direct correlation. If they're at 94% compliance, which the benchmarks, the minimum's 85. If they're at 94, 95, they're usually, again, the highest growing in the country. So, and we measure everything from uniform to cleanliness to WHS, personalising service, campaign.
So that's part of the same thing. So the personalising services are separate. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So can I just ask, I don't know where we're at with the presentation, but can I just ask everyone, how is it out there at the moment? How is everyone finding it to find franchisees, from some of you in the smaller chains?
Well, we've got a couple of people that also run franchise recruitment businesses. So
we'll hear from them as well.
Doug or Dave want to comment on that as well. But I think before they jump on, like if they want to comment, elections aren't great times for doing business. So I think lots of times things slow down a little bit in the lead up to an election. But and obviously there's a crazy guy in the US is mixing things up a little bit at the moment, which is flow-on effect into the Australian economy. But yeah, I think people were pretty, in the experience in the BDC businesses, it was people are a little bit more optimistic at the start of this year about finding franchisees than they were the last couple of years. But the election slowed it down a bit. That's my observation. I don't know if Doug or Dave want to comment.
Yeah, hi Bruce. Hi everyone. From our point of view, we're probably doing half as well as we were a year ago. We're finding it a lot harder, taking a lot longer. You got to spend a lot more time with the prospects. So it's certainly a much harder market.
Yep.
So Doug, while you're there, mate, how out of 10 for the franchise systems that you are aware of, have worked with, without pointing fingers at anyone, how would you rate them in their processes to recruit franchisees? I mean, you're at the pointy end, you're selling them, but how would you rate them?
I think the majority of the guys that we work with are emerging, so we sort of drive that, John. We're the ones that hold their hand right up to signing a document. So we're really heavily involved because we have to be, because they're not mature enough to actually manage that process themselves.
Yep. Okay. And from training and everything outside what you do, and understanding numbers of the business, etc. I'm not, if it's great, tell me, that's good. It's if it's average, what is it?
I think we're at an advantage with the emerging brands and a disadvantage. The advantage is that they're new and exciting, and they don't have a lot of legacy issues. And often, before we work with someone, we want to make sure that they're viable, that's going to work for a franchisee. So often their return on investment is better than a more established brand. So we find it easier that way, but it gets harder because they don't have the brand recognition. So the process is a lot longer to get somebody to commit.
Okay. All right.
Anyone else that's...
Yeah, I'll jump in for a second. This is Ben here from Banana Blossom. I'm on Yovna's computer. We're finding with our lead generation that's generally old customers. We used to use a franchise and recruitment company the past few years, but we're finding we're getting the wrong sort of leads and that were coming in. People who didn't really understand the business and the brand, and we're just finding out our leads generally coming from old customers.
Hey Ben, very good salad, mate. It's a very good salad.
Dave, what about you? How's it going? The brands that beat us every
Yeah, it's interesting because I share the same sentiment as Doug with regards to emerging brands, and then you've got established brands. There's obviously the excitement of the emerging, and then the difficulty of getting people on board. But it's amazing. We've got a mixture of large brands, small brands, you name it. We're generating anywhere from 40 to 80 inquiries a month for them. The thing about it is, and I'm about to do a massive analysis for a large group that we work for, if your unit economics don't stack up, it's not the leads. It's not the fault of the leads. It's not the fault of the marketing. It's actually the fault of the operations and the viability of the franchise itself. People are a lot more educated nowadays. Over the years of dealing with business advisors, accountants, you wouldn't believe the amount of accountants that will recommend a person not invest in a large brand. And once they go through the ROI calculator, they talk to the franchisees and they're punching in the financial information. It's a no. So that's, unless you're focused on unit economics, I've always maintained, even when I was a franchisor, if you have profitable franchisees, your franchise will sell itself. It's about a deselection process of bringing the right people into your system. You will just organically generate leads from the success of your franchisees. And that's what I maintain. And a lot of the brands that we do work for, we do a whole financial piece. And if it doesn't stack up, we end up parting ways. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to get finance across the line. We're not going to sacrifice somebody's hard-earned cash or assets that's going to come tumbling down. I think franchisors have a real responsibility to focus on unit economics.
Yep. 100%. I mean, before you invite people over for dinner and have a party, you make sure you got food and drinks and music going. So
that's a good segue into KPIs and P&Ls.
You want to go back? Sorry, the last slide.
nice segue.
Thank you. That's a nice segue of a segue, exactly. Franchising's tough, right? So we're not talking about any of this not knowing that for sure. But to John's point, if you get invited to a party and you turn up and you're wearing a clown suit and everybody else is dressed as, you know, the Joker, kind of the party gets off to a bad start. And so it's particularly important when it comes to P&Ls, KPIs, business indicators, and so on, that what prospects hear about on the way in is exactly what they see in month one when they start. And that's why it's particularly important to be really clear about what the right business indicators are, because that mismatch can be such a demotivator, you know, once a franchisee joins a system. And then if you wanted the progressive systems that Dave's trying to talk to and say, you know, you really need to allow potential franchisees to talk to other franchisees. That message that they're getting from the other, the worst thing that can happen is you say, hey, you should talk to franchisees, and the franchisor says, no, that's probably not going to help. So
I'll give you an example of this, John. And we parted ways with a company probably about 6 months ago. And we had to have a real hard conversation with the CFO of the company, believe it or not, who wasn't across. They were just measuring the performance of the franchisor, not measuring the performance of the franchisee. And we actually had quite a number of prospects in a particular state of which the prospects wanted to talk to people in that state, franchisees within that state. We couldn't get one franchisee to talk. So, like, you can come to recruitment agencies like myself and Doug and the other people that are out there, but unless you have the business operational, you're not going to break through any of these benchmarks or these numbers. It's got to financially return. If you've got a financially returnable business, you're going to have the banks on your side. They're going to want to lend to you at a very high percentage, and you're going to have, particularly in the food space, you get one good operator come in. They've got a network of people who they've been involved with, and they'll tell other people as well. And it's a referral network that then starts happening. Yeah,
it's a good point, Dave. And if we move on to the next slide, Bruce, you know, we've just gone from talking about who does tell your story. So a lot of you are in systems that are up to 25 or 30 franchisees. It's your story that's being told. So the P&L is telling your story. But then there's other folks in your business that need to be helping to tell your story too, and in as consistent a way as possible. So we thought we would ask one final question of everybody, because this was the most intriguing thing of all of our performance labs around the country last year, with networks of all shapes and sizes, which is, how many people do you have looking after your franchisees, and how often do they talk to them, and what do they talk about, and so on. And in this smaller group, you know, as a subset of emerging franchise networks, I guess not everybody can afford territory manager. You know, you can't afford layers upon layers of people. But more broadly around the country, we were astounded. The ratio went from 6 franchisees per territory manager to, I think one of them had like 93 or something. And so that again talks to the preparedness to plan for and budget for less tangible expenditure in order to build relationships. So it's not, can we create another product? Can we do a discount? Can we bundle? What do we spend on marketing? Can we make more money out of Newcastle than we can out of Adelaide? It's not that. It's who's actually the steward of your brand story, your brand essence, and keeping the engagement levels. Because, you know, it's particularly important to understand that around ensuring that franchisees are aligned, your entire team's aligned, engagement's higher, which intuitively leads to better performance. But we know scientifically better engagement leads to better performance with franchisees as well. So any observations around how your own business is resourcing from a territory manager next, if you own the business or whatever, at that next level? Is the biggest challenge finding the right people, being able to afford additional help, not wanting to let go?
I think, John, the other thing at the emerging stage is combining the recruitment person and the ops person as the same person. And so the skill set of someone who's doing franchise development, franchise recruitment, a sales beast is, compared to the more empathetic and ops person who's going around and trying to train and coach and support. Challenge often is when you're emerging that's the same person. It was the founder, because the founder could do all those things, and the founder's now employing people, and the first person they employ does both.
Yeah, good observation, for sure.
And I know that's a bit tricky for the emerging brands, because they tend to be better at one or the other of those two things. And so, thinking about for the emerging brands whether or not you still, because you may have outsourced some of those things at the earlier stage, and thinking about that. So now I know, Jason's just leaving, so I might just move to the last slide, John, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
And just if there's any other questions, we've got a couple of minutes, but just a bit of housekeeping. We're running it's a similar thing at the FCA. So I'm part of the Victorian State Chapter Committee. So those of you in the audience that are FCA members, we've got a panel discussion next time on operational topics. And so we've got another Baker's Delight. Beth is at Baker's Delight. Michael Urma spent lots of time at Boost Juice and BFT, as well as Baker's Delight back in the early days. Mark's at Santuro, and then Anna from Nurse Next Door. So we've got a range of people there. And then and then for us at BDC, we're going to really dive into recruitment next time. And Dave will be doing that session, who's on the call today, but also looking at the finance aspects, because there's nothing more frustrating than finding franchisees that are the right fit and then they can't get the money to open the site. So we'll dive into that with Steve Whiteside as well, looking at financing. Don, do you have any other final comments or things? I know there's a couple. We've got a couple other slides which have got the framework and stuff. Do you want to?
Oh no, that's fine. I think if we send out a follow-up from this, we can include the summary, and then we created what we call a franchisee performance pathway, which maps the relationship between a franchisee and a franchisor in terms of making their experience tangible. It's a bit of an insight. It just covers business planning, what a franchisee really expects from an operations perspective, and then things you could be doing across the network. And we say this with a caveat, we get that all this takes time and money. So none of this is an inherent criticism, it's just a reflection on the sorts of things that work and might actually make a difference if you wanted to explore it further. And we'd be happy to talk about any of this at any time. Cool.
Well, thank you very much. Any other last questions or comments from John, Dave, anyone else in the audience? If we've got one more minute.
Can I just say one thing for those of you that have got smaller businesses, to reiterate what Dave Lindsay just said, your only objective is to make franchisees money. Forget everything else. Just fucking make them money and get them positive about the system. And that's what's one of the biggest barriers, because people are in an environment where they need money to live and they ended up robbing Peter to pay Paul. You just can't do that. You just got to make the money, and you'll blow through that 25 mark very quickly.
We need the PG-15 on the start of our webinars, I think. And hopefully that Andrew's kids aren't listening to this as they're running their cross country. But
it was a disappointing result on the cross country, but I really enjoyed this session. So well worth it. And sorry for that again, and thank you very much. It was a great session. Appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thank you very much for everyone that contributed. We'd love to have open discussions, and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thanks a lot, guys. See ya.
Thank you,
everyone.